Welcome all. Max of the Accidental Engineer here. Today we are joined by Fede Alvarez. Welcome.
It's great to be here, Max.
Let me introduce you real quick, and then I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So Fede, we're in Berkeley, California today. Fede is going into his second year of his MBA program at Haas at UC Berkeley.
Go Bears.
Right on. And Fede just recently finished his summer internship in his MBA at mind introducing people to where you did your internship and what you were doing?
Yeah. So as Max says, I'm at Haas for an MBA, which is a 2-year program. And this summer I worked at iRobot. It's the largest consumer robotics company in the world with around like 60% market share in robotic vacuum cleaners. It's very popular for Roomba as one of the main products. And I was working there in the corporate development team, helping in some strategy work and also supporting the venture team.
Right on. So our audience might not know contextually why you are such a great guest to have on The Accidental Engineer. One big reason is that you did not do your undergraduate in computer science. You've not held jobs in software engineering. However, your undergrad was in industrial engineering.
Industrial engineering, yep.
We've had a couple guests on so far that have done physical engineering degrees in their undergraduate and have ultimately ended up in tech. And for our audience that might be interested in MBAs in particular and getting into tech, mind sharing with our audience how you found your way to an MBA program, especially in Berkeley, California.
Yeah. So I guess it all started in Spain, where I'm from. I decided to study industrial engineering because, in my view, it's a very broad studies. You get to see a lot of math, a lot of physics, a lot of mechanics, a lot of industrial processes. And if you do a bit of specialization, you can even get to understand see a bit of the business side. So I thought it was a very broad sort of study program. And at least in Spain, and I think in Europe too, engineering in industrial engineering is very well sought as a career that can more or less take you anywhere. You can do very technical roles, but you can also transition into business roles. And a very typical career path is to start in consulting. That's what I did. Because in a very short period of time, you can like work in different industries with different clients and have like a steep learning curve. So that's how my career evolved afterwards. I worked in consulting in the Middle East for 4 years. And then after this like 4.5 years of business experience, I really wanted to go back to class and get to learn like the theory that I never got the chance to learn back in industrial engineering, right? And it's proven to be a really powerful experience to like see in a classroom where you're sitting with 59 other classmates that are very international and have their perspectives on business and sort of discuss business in a very extended period. You have all the time to see it from different points of view, and then bring it back to your experience and relate it to your experience. It's like, 3 years ago when I was in that sort of project or with this client or I had this sort of a management issue or people issue, this is what I did, what I should have done, and it's very, very enriching.
Oh, for sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but another reason that I think you chose Haas versus other versus other MBA programs was locationally.
Exactly.
One, you like Berkeley a lot. But two, you're situated and positioned for a job market that is more tech and less consultative. That's
one of the good things about the MBA is that it enables career transitions. Some can be minor and some career transitions are very wild. So the MBA is a very good platform for like a year or think about what you want to do, experiment it that summer internship and get a chance to work for 2-3 months and see if there's a fit there and then make the decision after the MBA. So that's one of the reasons that I chose also Berkeley, because I was starting to think more importantly into the tech space that I wanted to transition, and this is where the future is being built in the Bay Area. So I thought that was going to be a good opportunity to learn about business and network and start to gradually think more carefully about the future ahead.
For sure.
And I think Berkeley is a great place to enable that transition. A lot of my classmates have moved into tech.
That's interesting. Do you mind sharing? I don't know these statistics off the top of my head, and you might not know it either, but what kind of percentage of your MBA class is going into tech versus other industries?
I think that around 30 to 35% of the class comes from consulting, and 30 to 35% of the class ends up in consulting afterwards. So there's a lot of switching there. But tech would be the second or the first hiring like another 35% of the class. I think I would feel comfortable saying that 60 to 80% of the class ends up in consulting and tech. These are the two largest hires.
So one of the common attributes of an MBA program is the internship in the summer between your first and second years. And there's, depending on what you want to get into after the MBA, there's a certain amount of hunting that you have to do for that internship. In other cases, employers will come to MBA programs to recruit for summer internships. Which was more the case for you trying to get into tech coming from consulting?
It was a bit both. And it's very interesting to see how the hiring process works, at least in the US for MBA markets, because it starts as early as September and it can finish as early as May. You know, you have large companies tend to come very early, the Googles, the Adobes, the Ciscos, and they have very structured career progressions or interview processes in which they tend to make offers very early on, around even October, November.
So that's maybe 1 to 2 months into your MBA?
That's actually how it goes. Like, I would say the first one that starts tends to be consulting, actually. People start their interviews actually around the first week of January, if I remember correctly. I wasn't going to that career path, so I don't know the dates exactly. But in my case, I took like the first half of the year more as an exploration. I was trying to work in different areas to sort of build up or confirm my hypothesis that I wanted to go into tech. So I would say, for the first half of the year, I did that. And then I found that there was an enormous amount of opportunities after January, even more than up to December. So I think that it's not an issue to have it shouldn't be a concern to get an offer right away. There's plenty of time, and I feel that the market now is pretty hot in the sense there's a lot of opportunities and the hiring processes are going on pretty quickly. So I feel that there's a lot of demand for people that are interested and can add some value in the tech space.
So iRobot brought you out to Boston as opposed to the Bay Area. Could you get a sense, even just in a summer, of how different the job markets are? Or the development of the tech industry in Boston in comparison to the San Francisco Bay Area?
I was very surprised about that. Well, first of all, iRobot, it brings great talent. It's a robotics company, so there's a lot of roboticists, a lot of the hardware engineers, and gradually more software engineers. It's a very technical company, which I love. It's just because as an engineer, I love to go around and speak with other engineers. So I was very surprised to see positively the amount of talent that there is. Not only in iRobot, but Boston overall. Obviously, there's great universities there.
Harvard, MIT.
Have you heard of them? Yeah, they're really good, and they bring incredible talent. The startup scene, as far as I saw, is very strong, is picking up. There's a lot of very interesting startups emerging in the Boston area. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that.
So being an MBA intern, you were not interning as an engineer, obviously. You mentioned these startups in the Boston area. What were you doing with iRobot over the summer? We don't need to go into such specific detail that you don't want to, but...
So iRobot has a venture and is always looking to invest in promising startups that have the potential to add value strategically to the business. So one of the responsibilities that I was doing is analyzing several technologies, sort of like 3D imaging, object recognition, and understanding how the industries were evolving, and most importantly, scouting some of the startups. So it was a great opportunity to sort of have conversations with early on startups, some as small as 2-3 people and some much larger, and try to understand, what their offering was, what their vision was, and to see where they fit within the industry that they were operating in. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I had an opportunity to speak with several CEOs and CTOs, which was really enriching. So I really enjoyed that. I was very surprised about the scene in Boston. One of the reasons that I wanted to go to iRobot, obviously, because I really wanted to get engaged in hardware, robots, which I've had a long tradition with since I was like a kid.
Yeah.
So that was like a very good fit there. And I also wanted to like test the waters or get to learn better the Boston scene. Yeah. I already love the Bay Area scene, so I wanted to understand better the Boston scene.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think a lot of our audience probably has not done an MBA program, might hypothetically think about doing an MBA program. You mentioned the percentages of people who end up in consulting, people who end up in tech, specifically for UC Berkeley's MBA program. Is there a certain percentage that end up starting their own businesses?
There are some percentages. Yeah, I would say less than 5%, which is still pretty high. 5%. The class is 260 roughly. So the thing is that some people, I think the percentage is much larger if you start seeing when they start their company. Maybe most of the people found a company 5 years after their MBA. So just at the end of MBA, I would say less than 5%, but the percentage is much higher afterwards. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship activities and a lot of opportunities to get involved with other entrepreneurs at Berkeley, which is really interesting. So for example, last year, one of the things that I did was help out in a startup that is working with wearables. So they were coming from a very technical perspective, and we sort of helped them out think about their business model, think about their pricing options, and what are like the fundamentals to sort of build a business. And that was really interesting. So just like my experience, many other classmates like leverage on that opportunity to work out with other entrepreneurs at Berkeley overall.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, which is great.
I think you're the first guest we've had on that it has a very specific interest in hardware tech.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, one, why that is, based on your background.
Yeah.
But also, what is kind of distinguished about who gets involved in hardware startups? Because by and large, our audience are interested in software engineering in some form or the other. But who are often the co-founders or early employees of a hardware startup?
At UC Berkeley, for example?
Or anywhere.
Yeah,
Boston.
The people that I've met tend to be more mechanical engineers. Probably, although I've seen some software engineers too. The reason that I started, I think it comes back to like when I was a kid, I've always been much more attracted to like hardware, robotics, and then industrial engineering is a very sort of tangible career. Everything is around mechanics, mechanical elements, industrial processes, industrial plants, things that you can like tangibly see, as opposed to software, which is on the back end, right? Yeah. So just throughout my evolution, I've always been much more engaged with products that I can touch and see. That was one of the reasons why I pursued hardware. But
I realized I didn't make my question super clear. Did your undergraduate education in industrial engineering have much crossover? For example, when you were doing your internship this last summer, any coursework that you can recommend to people who might be in their undergraduate right now?
I think the quick answer to that is no, but there's a trick. In my view, engineering is a great career, and you get to learn how to think analytically about processes and how to structure ideas. It's not that in my professional career I've applied many of the things that I learned. Like I can say, that this chapter in this specific class, for sure, it was imperative that I learned it at university. That hasn't happened. But it is true that the way that you learn how to solve problems, not be afraid of numbers, and how to just be very structured in your approach and very analytical, that has been very valuable. And that's, I think, 80-90% of what you take out of engineering, in my view. I think obviously other people have had more technical careers, and in that case, obviously, you do apply much more than the words you learn.
So I realize after your MBA, you've told me this, we can tell our audience this, that you're very much interested in corporate development type of role in tech. How's the crossover from your industrial engineering undergrad and your consulting in the Middle East. We didn't really go into what you were doing in the Middle East. That might be an interesting topic to hear about.
So yeah, well, what I did is basically for around 2 years, work in strategy for ops, for the ops side of businesses across different industries, which was really interesting because when I graduated in 2012 roughly, Spain was still going through a hard economic crisis.
Yeah.
So Spain and Europe, we might say. Yeah. So I really wanted to go to much larger growth areas.
Yeah.
And the Middle East back then, when the price of oil was pretty high, was growing tremendously. So that enabled me just as a fresh graduate to go and work in really big players in the region, in the Gulf region, that were experiencing a lot of growth. So I did 2 years of experience across petrochemicals industry, mining, even agri-food, and sort of even the vehicle industry, which was very broad and very interesting. And then I sort of focused a bit more in the energy space in Dubai, because in Dubai, or at least in the Middle East, the energy industry is what really moves the needle. And when I mean moves the needle, is that there's where you see investments in the billion-dollar scales. And I really wanted to get an experience there and see how do you think around millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of consequences of the decisions you make. Yeah. So that was really interesting too. So I've always liked that strategy work. However, I think that the future is tech, and there's gonna, in the next couple of years, probably is gonna be enormous transitions. So I would like to be a part of that, and always think about it either from the strategy or the corporate development side. Both are pretty interlinked to some extent.
So one relationship between the work you were doing in the Middle East and the Bay Area and the technology industry that I find really fascinating is the Saudi royal families investing into rideshare companies like Uber and maybe Lyft, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting way for them to financially hedge the downside risk of oil prices coming down, which they have. But
they're doing it for several reasons. I think one of them is all the countries in the Gulf are very wealthy, and they have established these wealth funds. So this is money that the government has that has to allocate it somewhere, get a return to then, so that those countries can allocate it and invest it in their country. That's sort of what the scheme is. So they're putting it in funds that are looking for returns, and one of them is in startups, obviously. That's one of the views, get financial return. But also, I think another movement is that they're gradually trying to bring talent or foster sort of an entrepreneurial mindset. And I think there's a lot of push to sort of learn around venture capital, learn about entrepreneurship, and get some lessons there as to how they can bring that into their region too. So I think it's twofold.
Interesting. Before we go, I guess I should mention that you're soon to be taken off the job market.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. And that I'm really looking forward to seeing what you do in the next few years, because I'm very bullish on that.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll have a catch up afterwards, and I'll be happy to share.
Absolutely. It would be really cool to do this in, I don't know, several months or 12 months from now.
Great.
Dude, appreciate it.
Yeah.